Okay, we are live. I'm waiting for the countdown for the intro. All right. Well, Kufar Akbar, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Cross and the Crescent discussion group. This is, of course, a show that is dedicated to rightly dividing the truth between Islam and Christianity. And we explore the evidences for both of those faiths here on the show every single week. Actually, twice a week, because we are here every Tuesday evening at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we're here on Sundays at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we usually run for about 2 hours. We've been running for 2 hours on Sunday afternoons, but on Tuesday nights, normally an hour and a half. But we have been out to 2 hours lately, except for the last couple of weeks. I've had, as a matter of fact, when we were in studio, I got a phone call from the Queen saying that I got to go pick up the granddaughter at 6:30, and I'm like, anyway. She's going to take care of it, so I don't have to worry about doing grandfatherly duties tonight. Like we have been. I see we got a lot of people in the chat tonight. All right. That is exciting. Okay. So tonight we are going to do something a little bit different. Normally we just have a panel. We have a discussion. We pick a topic and we have a discussion. Oh, by the way, Sunday, I had an original thought again today. Now, this is like 2 out of the last 8 days I've had an original thought, which very uncommon. But Sunday, I've come up with a topic already. Now, you guys, I'm going to run it by you and tell me if this is a good idea or not. But I got this idea from participating on that place that we spend half of our lifetimes on, this Clubhouse. And I'm thinking that we should have a show or do a topic on the heretical evidences for the Quran. And what I mean by that is use the evidences that the Quran Muslim Dawahists use, follow this train of thought, Muslim Dawahists use in order to say, look, they're in Christian history that verifies what the Quran teaches. For an example, here's an example. The Quran teaches that Christ was never crucified. So why not do a show, or who do the Muslims normally cite as evidence that, well, the Christians used to teach this also. So they'll normally go to some of the Gnostic sources, like the Basilides, the Marcionites, pure Docetism type stuff, okay? Why not say, well, this is, they're going to use heretical information, heretical facts, known heretical groups as evidence to justify the Quran. So who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe a bunch of heretics in the Quran, or are you going to believe Orthodox Christianity? Am I making sense, or am I just kind of babbling here?
It might be interesting. I'll say that much. You can see a problem with it, but yeah.
I think it would be
Carolinians. I mean, that would be.
I think it would be even more interesting to discuss what those heretical sources that they're borrowing actually believed, what they taught, who these people were. Yeah, because
that's what I have a lot of material
it's the opposite
on
of what
if
they
you're
think.
interested.
Right.
Yeah.
I have tons of material on Gnosticism.
If you guys haven't noticed, and this is I was going to get to that, but we have Mary Harb. Now, Mary, I wanted to ask you. Now, Harb, that last name, I used to always open the show saying that I'm in the Kafir cave, or I'm in the Kafir cave in Dar al Harb, Kafiristan. But I don't say that anymore because it's, I don't know, it takes a lot of people off. Now, am I right that you use that word, that name Harb, as war, or am I wrong on that?
I use it as war, but it's also an actual German name. It's one of the few last names that are both in Arabic and in German. And since I am of a Germanic extraction mostly, then Harb is an appropriate name for me. But yes, it also means war.
Okay. I thought I had it figured out. That just shows me, doesn't it?
A quick point here, Eric, on what Mary suggested there with respect to heretical sources. In my interaction with Muslims, one book that they surprisingly rely a lot on is the Gospel of Barnabas.
Right.
I mean, to us, I mean, it's clearly heretical and it's garbage. We dump it, but they rely so heavily on that. So I'm wondering if one day we could one session we could just go through that book and show why it's clearly a fraud.
Well, the reason that they're relying on it now is that recently a forgery that is actually internally dated to the 1500s, right? Inside this physical book, there is a date saying when it was written. So it was written in 1500, was sold, and it was sold under the pretense that was from 500 AD. This isn't even possible with the script that was used, but forget that. Internally, it says 1500, but in all the Muslim countries, they ran this thing like, oh, the Gospel of Barnabas has been found to go all the way back to the 500s, but of course it doesn't. It does date, it literally dates from the 1500s, about when this forgery was made, one of many copies that were made around that time. But it also does not support Islam because it was written by by a Muslim who just didn't even know the Quran very well, because it says that the Messiah is Muhammad. Yeah. So,
yeah, there's a lot of internal errors in it that clearly demonstrates that it's a forgery.
I agree, but it surprises me that they rely on it so much, Eric.
Oh well, we could do that. Well, most certainly. I've actually had. I don't know if I've done an entire show on it before, but I've done. We've talked about it before. I would have no problem doing that again. As a matter of fact, I drew the reason why I did that show was because have you guys ever gone over to that website, Ask a Muslim? Has anybody ever been there? Okay.
Yes, I have.
Okay, so I used to do when I had this show. I used to do segments for this show because this is before I actually got friends and people would come in and talk to me on Tuesday nights. I would have segments, and one of the segments was "Don't Ask a Muslim," and why should we not ask a Muslim? And I think of that segment that night because the Ask a Muslim has an entire article justifying or trying to provide legitimacy to the Gospel of Barnabas, and it was just amazing how dishonest they were in the way that they presented it. But what else would you expect from an organization like that? Okay, so let's go ahead and introduce our Miss Mary. Miss Mary, we met on Clubhouse. If you don't know her, I kind of equate Mary to the female version of Sam Shimon. She's just as vocal, just as persuasive. What's another word? Not intelligent, because we know women only have half the intelligence of men. But I'm kidding. But what's the word? Knowledgeable, having this base of knowledge to shoot facts off at you. And I've seen Muslims go try to engage her on on Clubhouse, and it's like they get machine gunned. It's entertaining, to say the least. But I thought I'd invite her on tonight, and I told her that she could pick any topic she wants. We can talk about whatever she wants tonight, and she picked a verse from the Quran that I don't even understand. So what I'm going to do, and after we sat last night and discussed it for a little bit, it became clear after she started talking about what they were saying, and I said, aha, had one of those aha moments. Okay, Muhammad thought that X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to let her take the mic for a while and let her run with it. And if we want to engage, ask questions, provide our own feedback, well, we'll go ahead and do that. So, Mary, can you? You said we're going to be in chapter 6 of the Quran, or did you want to go someplace else?
If you want to pull up, actually, we're going to go somewhere else first.
Okay.
You can't click on that link. You'll have to copy and paste that link. I think it doesn't work quite right that I put in chat there. See if you can pull that up, and I'll go ahead and start.
Okay, private chat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
So Muhammad taught different things at different points during his career. Okay, so initially he taught that at any moment now we're going to have an impending doom coming down upon everyone. And the last day is coming right now, is the first thing that he taught. He missed the date. The second thing he taught is that he needed to call everyone to Islam. That's what needed to happen before anything else can happen. He's the last prophet. And he said that there is a pattern that's established. He taught that every people group in the world has fallen into the same pattern. He's the very last one to fall into this pattern. So the first thing that happens is that they get a prophet. Now, if you go to Surah 16, ayah 36, you will see, and this is the B, An-Nal, and certainly we've raised up in every community, that's Ummah, a messenger saying, serve Allah and avoid Taghut, which is the rebellious ones, meaning idols or false gods. Then among them were some whom Allah guided, and among them were some on whom was obligated the straying. And that word hakat there, it means to make true. Okay, so it means not just to prove true, but this is made true upon them. So it was obligated that they strayed. So travel on the earth and see how was the end of the deniers, of the people who said that these were lies. So here's the kind of one of the verses that support this. Here, from every community, we raised up in every community, Ummah, a messenger. And we find out also that the prophet was always, if you will go to 14, verse 4. So Ibrahim, verse 4. We find later that the prophet was always from among the people he was sent to, and he was always sent with their language. So we see in this one, and we have not sent any messenger except with the tongue of his folk. And that word there, kaum, it means like it's an ethno-linguistic designation. So it means like people who have the same language and culture together. They're his own. That's why I translate it as folk rather than any other sort of people. So he's going to his own folk. He is with the tongue of his own folk, that he might make all clear to them. Then Allah leads astray whomever he wills, and he guides whomever he wills, and he is the Almighty, all-wise. So now you have kind of these two things in your head. Yeah? Got it?
Got it.
Yeah. So we kind of have these two things in our head, that every people is getting, there is no community except that they got a messenger, and that every messenger was sent with the tongue, with the language of his own people, because so that they can understand. That's why, right? Now, so this is the first thing that happens. Second thing that happens is that some people, a minority of them, may follow the prophet. It's also possible that none at all will follow the prophet. Let me send you a link for this guy. And this And this same the hadith that I'm sending you is in the two Sahihs as well. However, I'm just using it here where it's quoted from the other ones. Ibn Abbas reported, the Messenger of Allah said, I was shown the past nations. I saw a prophet, and that there is Ummah too, by the way. I saw a prophet who had a very small group, less than 10 in total, with him, and another prophet who was accompanied by only 1 or 2 men, and some who did not even have one. Suddenly I was shown a huge crowd, and I thought that these were my Ummah, but I was told, this is Musa and his people. But looked toward the other side. I looked and beheld a great mass of great assemblage. I was told, these are your people. And then it goes on, but that doesn't matter. So, number 1, prophet with the language of his people, sent to his people from among his people so that they understand. Number 2, a certain number of people, 0 to many, follow him. Then number 3, the people who are warned and reject God will temporarily get rewards and riches to make them think that they are on the right path. This is part of Allah's misguidance. And this will be it's kind of embedded in other verses, so I'm not going to go straight to that now. But I'll demonstrate it whenever we go to the next part. Then 4, after this, so now we've had the prophet, he's come. He's given the message. Some people have followed him. The rest have had a chance to reject him. And then the folk who have been warned will be visited by a cataclysm. This is separate from the final judgment. This is separate from the great hour. And there are various examples of this in the Quran. There is a flood. There's Noah's flood. There is also a flood of Musa, which most people don't realize because it's kind of hidden because Muhammad rewrote over it. There's a destroying wind that took the people of Hud. There's an earthquake that took the people of Saleh, and a rain of fire from heaven, of course, which took the people of Lot. So this is the pattern. And also there was the Tower of Babel is also seen as being ended by another catastrophic event of the sort. So catastrophe is coming upon the people after they've been warned, after some have believed, after some have rejected. So let's go to Surah 17 has a fairly lengthy section that kind of establishes this point. So I will pop that into the and if anybody's like saying stuff, 15 verse 15 is where we're going to start. And if anybody's saying stuff in the chat, let me know because I'm not looking at it right now. So
okay. I'm trying to keep up with you, and I'm trying to keep up with chat.
Yep. So we're going to start the end. Yep, the very end of verse 15, right before 16. It will start. And we are not punishing until we raise up a messenger. And this is Allah speaking. So he's not going to punish anyone until he raises up a messenger. And then in 16, it says, and when we desire to destroy a city, we command its luxuriant people. So it's wealthy people who are living in luxury, right? And they defiantly disobey therein. Then the statement is made true against it, and we destroy with destruction. And this word that means statement or declaration. This is one of Allah's decrees, right? So he's decreed that they're going to be destroyed because that's his desire. And so once they disobey, as it is ordained for them to do, then they get visited with destruction. If you continue in verse 17, it says, and how many generations we have destroyed after Noah, and sufficient is thy Lord concerning the sins of his servants, aware, seeing. So here's the pattern. Prophet, warning, cataclysmic destruction. And this will happen to every single city before the day of resurrection. So if you keep going, still Surah 17, but now it's verse 58. It says, there is not any town except that we are destroying it before the day of resurrection, or we are punishing it with a severe punishment. that was written in the book. So this has been written in the heavenly book of Allah, in which all future acts are decreed. So this is going to happen. However, this is what happens to the unbelievers. The true followers of Allah and his messengers are not harmed. And this is really what we're going to kind of hone in on. We're going to go to chapter 6 now, or Surah 6. You might want to bring up something that has the whole of 6, because I'm going to move pretty quickly through it.
I don't have anything like that.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
All right. So I am going to start with verse 4.
4. Oh my gosh, I thought it was 47. Hold on.
Yeah, well, I'm skipping tons of stuff in between. That's why I said I'm moving really fast through this, because I'm doing the relevant pieces. So it says, not a sign of their Lord comes to them, but they are turning away from it. Then indeed they denied the truth when it came to them, but soon there shall come to them news of that they used to mock. So news of the thing that they used to be mocking is coming to them. What is this thing that they're mocking? It's the judgment, because it sees, have they not seen how many we destroyed before them, many generations? We had established them in the earth as we never established you. We sent heaven upon them in torrents. That's wonderful rains, and appointed rivers to flow beneath them. Then we destroyed them because of their sins and produced after them other generations. So here's that pattern. They were warned, and then the people who were misguided were temporarily given like extra goody stuff, so they thought that they were in the right, and then they were destroyed. Skipping to verse 10. Messengers.
Okay, just real quick in chat, our friend Emmanuel Shahid, he wants to know if you're a Caucasian convert.
No, Emmanuel, it's Mary. Too many Marys. You know me. I'm just wearing this just for fun. It's for a character that I would like to do someday.
No, Mary isn't Muslim. Yeah, thank you, Chloe.
No, it's just easy and safety, and it's a little bit more interesting than looking at just a little flashing thing. So, hey, yeah, it's too many Marys. I'm over on Clubhouse now instead of Discord. Okay, so messengers indeed were mocked at before you, but those that scoffed at them were surrounded by what they used to mock at. So they were mocking specifically at the warning about cataclysm. And so then they were overtaken, surrounded, and overwhelmed by what they used to mock at. So then we say, travel on the earth, then see how is the end of the deniers. So you look around and you see all these people who have been destroyed. Now, if we jump all the way to 25, we find out that Muhammad, of course, is right now in Mecca. He's yelling at the Meccans, as he usually is. And specifically, this is whenever he starts having conflict with a guy named Al-Nadr. Al-Nadr ibn Harith, excuse me, not Harith, Harith. So Al-Nadr ibn Harith. So he was a friend of Abu Sufyan, who is a very important later Meccan leader. And he was from Taif, and he was a knowledgeable man and well-traveled and knew the stories of Persia and stuff. So Muhammad here is like yelling at him. And among them who listen to thee, we have appointed coverings for their hearts, lest they understand it, and in their ears heaviness. That means like deafness. And if they see every sign, they will not believe in it, so that when they come to thee, they dispute with thee. Those who disbelieve say, this is not but the tales of ancients. So he's the first one who say, hey, I've heard this. These are ridiculous legends. Why are they repeating them? And Al-Nadr used to prance around telling his own fake surahs with other legends and say, hey, aren't my stories even better than his? So needless to say, Muhammad had him murdered when he took over Mecca, even though he promised safety to all the Meccans.
But wasn't he the only one he had murdered?
No, he had a bunch of people that he wanted to have murdered. Like 2 or 3 of them got away, and a few of them were pardoned. But no, he had a bunch of people murdered. He had like a hit list. He had a kill list that you need to kill him even if you see it. So Al-Nadr was still saying, So he's going on and verse 40, and Muhammad's going on and saying, "Oh, say, have you seen if Allah's punishment comes upon you, or the hour comes upon you?" Notice that these are two different things. Will you call upon other than Allah if you are truthful? No, him you will call, and he would remove that for which you call upon him if he wills, and if you will, forget what you associate. And indeed, we surely sent to communities before thee, and we seized them with adversity and hardship, that maybe they will humble themselves. If only when our smiting had come upon them, they had humbled themselves, but their hearts were hard, and the shaitan made attractive to them what they used to do. Well, I thought that was Muhammad, or that it was Allah who did it just a few verses before, but now it's shaitan. Since they're the same person, we're not surprised that we see this confusion here. Right. So that when they forgot what they were reminded of it, we opened to them the gates of everything until when they rejoiced with what they were given, we seized them suddenly, then behold, they were dumbfounded. So this again is the people who are on the wrong way get all kinds of nice stuff, and so they think that they're on the right path. And then suddenly calamity, this catastrophe, this cataclysm is supposed to strike them, right? And then our buddy Al-Nader says, would you just stop talking about this cataclysm already? If it's going to happen, bring it. And then verse 47 is the response to this. It says, say, what think you? If Allah's punishment comes upon you suddenly or openly, shall any be destroyed except the people, the wrongdoers? So only the wrongdoers will be destroyed. Let's keep reading. We do not send the messengers except as bearer of glad tidings and warnings. Whoever believes and reforms, no fear shall be on them, neither shall they sorrow. But those who denied our signs, the punishment shall touch them, for that they used to rebel. So this establishes very clearly right here that the next thing that's happened. We talk about kind of 4 steps so far. First, messengers come from among their own folk with their own language. They bring the call to Islam with glad tidings and warnings. Whoever Allah's wills follows this messenger. It might be no one. It might be lots of people. The arrogant reject him and trust in their riches. They believe that the gods are already favored them because they are encouraged with more riches from Allah to think this. The town and folk that have received warning are then visited by a cataclysmic punishment. And now 5, here's the new one. The people who obey the loyal messenger are not in any way harmed, nor are they to be afraid. Okay, super important. Again, this says, we do not send the messengers except as bearers of glad tidings and warnings. Whoever believes and reforms, no fear shall be on them, and neither shall they sorrow. So
what verse is that, Mary?
That is 48.
Okay, 48. Okay, so I got ahead of myself. All right, sorry. Let me drop back.
So drop back to 48.
Right.
And in 47, again, it says, shall any be destroyed except the people, the wrongdoers? So only the wrongdoers will be destroyed. Only the wrongdoers shall fear. Only the wrongdoers shall sorrow. No one else will fear. No one else will sorrow. And no one else will be destroyed.
So what's the $1 million question here? What is it?
Yes. So yet we find in the link that I just posted, if you can click on it, that someone else did fear and someone else did, in fact, sorrow. It was narrated that Aisha said, if the messenger of Allah saw a cloud that looked as if it were bringing rain, the color of his face would change, and he would go in and out and walk to and fro. Then, if it rained, he would feel relieved. Aisha mentioned to him what she had seen him do, and he said, how do you know? Perhaps it would be as the people of Hud said. Then, when they saw a dense cloud coming toward the valleys, they said, this is a cloud bringing rain. Nay, but it is that torment which you were asking to be hastened. So, Muhammad was explicitly afraid of torment coming from Allah that is only going to cause sorrow, and is only going to cause sorrow. It's only going to cause fear, and it's only going to torment the disbelievers. And yet Muhammad was so afraid of this that whenever he saw a cloud that looked like it was bringing rain, he became fearful. We keep going. There are many of these. Narrated Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, I never saw Allah's apostle laughing loudly enough to enable me to see his uvula, but he used to smile only, and whenever he saw clouds or wind, signs of deep concern would appear on his face. I said, "Oh, Allah's apostle, when people see clouds, they usually feel happy, hoping that it would rain. While I see that when you see clouds, one could notice signs of dissatisfaction on your face." He said, "Oh, Aisha, what is the guarantee for me that there will be no punishment in it? Since some people were punished with a wind. Verily, some people saw the punishment, while others, but seeing the cloud, they said, this cloud will give us rain." And again, it says the color of his face would change, and if it rained, he would feel relaxed. And the same verse is being quoted, the severe torment, right? The next one, Sahih Muslim, the Book of Rain. When he saw dark clouds or winds, he saw signs of fear on his face. I said, I find people being happy when they see the dark cloud and hope that it bring rain. And he said, Aisha, I'm afraid that there might be calamity in it, for people was afflicted with wind, and when the people saw the calamity, they said it was a cloud which would bring us rain. Again, he would get up, walk to and fro. His face would change color. When it rained, that would leave him. And he said, I do not know. Perhaps it's going to be the torment. Again, here's the reply. I notice when you see it, the signs of abomination on your face. So he's reacting to it as if it's an abomination. He replied, Aisha, what gives me safety from the fact that it might contain punishment? A people were punished by that wind. When people saw the punishment, they said, this is a cloud that will give us rain. So here he is. He is so scared. You just keep going and going and going. She says that I see distress on your face. And he agrees that he's distressed. So whenever he saw it, he would seek refuge from, try to pray to seek refuge from Allah. Keeps going again and again about his terror and his prayers against being struck whenever he saw this. So
why would he be okay? So Mary, the $1 million question is why would he be scared though? I mean, is that what you're getting to?
Yes, he is only scared because he is convinced in his own mind that he is no longer a true messenger, if he ever was, and instead he and his people are among the wrongdoers. For example, you can see in 652 that he could become one of the wrongdoers. That possibility is actually never excluded in the Quran. Anytime it says, if you do this, there are two different forms of if in Arabic, one of which is a contrafactual conditional, which means that if this would happen, but it won't, basically is what it means. And then the other one is not a contrafactual. It's an if-then statement. This is true, that if this happens, then this will happen. And the statements about him denying signs and rebelling against Allah, they're all if-then. They're not conditional. They're not contrafactual conditionals. They are just regular conditionals. So Muhammad could, according to the grammar of the Quran, at any point become an apostate and rebel against Allah. And here we see in his fear, his terror anytime it rained. Nobody else was concerned. Like, he's the only one who's this fearful. But we see in his terror that he knew that he was a false prophet, because he himself said the words that no fear shall be on the believer, no sorrow, and only the wrongdoers will be destroyed, and no one else will be touched by the punishment. And yet Muhammad was explicitly afraid of being touched by the punishment. So this kind of Aisha would have been old enough to notice this after he had received any number of self-serving revelations that enabled him to have many corrupt privileges. He was enabled to have more wives than anyone else. He was allowed to marry people other people couldn't. He was allowed to have a temporary nikah with women who offered themselves to him. That is actually in the Quran, and in the Ahadith, you can see that there were women who offered him to him, and he just took them up on it. I guess they did their iddah before and after and had a night with the prophet. And if you, he later said that he doesn't even have to keep the promises that he makes. Like if he swears an oath and Allah hasn't told him to do it, he doesn't have to keep it. He takes 20% of the booty. He just has this huge list of privileges that are just for him, and they're all corrupt. They're all self-serving, and allowing to marry women who would otherwise be incestuous, that kind of thing. He was also growing wealthy because of his own actions. While he gave away huge amounts of stuff, he also made use of things too for his own benefit. And he did support those many wives that he had. His people were now living the life of those luxuriant ones. So in his own theology, it's you should be facing adversity and be humble, and then Allah will become the retribution and will wipe the other people off. But he's the one who's taking loot from all their raids against everyone else, and they are of the oppressors. And he probably knew it at this point. And this is his admission in his actions, though not in his words. He had not waited for the help of Allah. He knew that at this point, the Meccans were not going to get the smiting that he had promised them. Why? Not because Allah wasn't Allah, but because he wasn't a true prophet. Because everybody else got those smitings, right? But somehow Mecca, did fire and brimstone ever come down on Mecca? Did they ever get a terrible wind that killed tons of people? Did they ever get a flood that killed tons of people? No calamity struck them in Muhammad's lifetime. Muhammad specifically said that that is what is going to happen. And he did not wait for this to happen. He instead attacked Mecca and took it over. And the reason that he did that is because he knew darn well he wasn't a true prophet, and so he no longer had any expectation that Allah would do this for him, as he originally did when he was still deluded back in Mecca. Because when he was in Mecca, I think he actually really did drink his own Kool-Aid. But I think very shortly after going to Medina, he no longer did, and he knew he was a fraud. So the entire reason.
Back that up. What did you say? You said that in Mecca, you think that he actually believed he was a prophet, but by the time he got to Medina, he no longer thought that.
So you watch his theology suddenly change rapidly. You see the loss of his confidence that the Jews, because he seems to have actually thought that Jews and Christians would find all the things in their scriptures that he's claiming that they'll find. And at some point when he actually got in direct contact with a number of Jews and Christians, he had to come to face with the fact that everything that he said about their scriptures wasn't true, that there wasn't anything like what he was claiming. And so what's he going to do now? Is he going to admit that he was deluded? No, he's going to go and get really rich and kill a bunch of people and start a new state. Because, he was always a corrupt dude. He was just a deluded, corrupt dude before. And now he's not as deluded, but even more corrupt, because now he's not even deluded that he's not corrupt. So once he got in discussions with actual Christians, actual Jews, and he realized that so much of what he said was wrong, then he had a choice. And his choice was to double down and pretend that he wasn't a fake when he perfectly well knew that he was. So that is why he conquered Mecca, because he had been promising for like 20 years at this point nearly that Mecca was about to be smitten by a catastrophe from Allah. And yet, rather than waiting for that catastrophe to take place, like he swore up and down that it would, instead he conquered it, because he actually didn't believe that it would anymore. But because he wasn't a true prophet, but he now feared, he still thought that these things had happened to Lut and to Noah and to Hud and Saleh. And he thought all of these things had happened in the past. And so he thought that they would happen to him because he was a false prophet. And that's what this admission is every time it rains, his terror, because he knows perfectly well at this point what he'd done and that he was a fraud.
Okay, so when you engage people on this with this, what is normally the reaction from Muslims? Do they provide any type of apologetic for it? Do they provide any type of
Absolutely
excuse?
not. No, they go, they cluck their tongues because that's what they do, and they go, no, 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 and then you go, okay, what is it? It's like, oh, well,
Let's go talk
and then nothing. They just like they throw Islamic chaff and try to change the subject. Sure. Occasionally, they, what an intelligent Muslim would say, and because I always think of how to steel man my opponent, what an intelligent man would say was that, oh, well, he's not afraid for himself. He's afraid for the Meccans he loves so much, or someone else who isn't, or the Medinans who don't follow him. But the fact is, he was doing war on them and was perfectly willing to kill anyone who didn't believe. In addition, it explicitly says that no one will be destroyed except the wrongdoers, and also they shall have no fear or sorrow. So it is explicit that those who are among the believers should not fear and should not sorrow. They shouldn't sorrow for anyone because it's the just deserts of those people, and so there shouldn't be any sorrow. So that would mean that the Quran is wrong. And in fact, there is fear on the righteous and there is sorrow on the righteous. So the Quran, now throw it in the trash because it's just ridiculous. It's wrong. Because if Muhammad the messenger was afraid, then every single believer should be afraid for other people or whatever. But
okay, Mary, I have a question for you, a quick question.
Go for it.
So how does 46:9 fit in with what you're saying? Say, I am not the first messenger ever sent, nor do I know what will happen to me or to you. I only follow what is revealed to me. I'm only sent with a clear warning. Does that fit in any way?
Well, that talks about his eternal punishment. So he doesn't know whether or not he will apostate and deny Allah at some point. That's actually what that's saying. That's talking about his eternal state. There are a number of ahadith that are about not knowing what has become of people, and it's always after death. So it's that he does not have assurance that he will not one day deny Allah and become one of the disbelievers.
That's interesting, because the way I understood that is that he was not confident after all of what he was going on. As you said, he had no assurance of salvation.
Correct.
He says he's the last messenger. He's the last messenger. Okay, so he's the last, and he's not sure what's going to happen to him?
Right.
That makes sense to me. If somebody is confident that they believe and they know what they're doing, and that God is really guiding them. If he's sure God is guiding him, why is he not sure?
Why can he not give them the straight path? Or at least, even if he doesn't know whether or not Allah has ordained for any particular person to follow the straight path, why can he not at least explain the straight path that will be of assurance that you absolutely will be safe then? The ridiculousness that Islam reached by the end, the end of Islam was about where Muhammad was saying that if you do absolutely anything, you'll go to Jannah, because he was just trying to get as many converts to build up his empire as possible. And he changed a huge number of his teachings and was talking about how everybody, almost everybody, all you have to do is say the Shahada, you're going to make it to Jannah. And then his earlier ones are the ones that are so much more pessimistic, where he was he was also more realistic about the consequences of sin, because he was more honest at that point. But then whenever he became very dishonest and he had no interest anymore in engaging honestly with even his own theology, and was just making it up to suit the circumstances, that's where we kind of get this change happening, and it gets more and more extreme as things go on. So his terror, together with the other things, although he was more suicidal in the beginning, which is always a good sign in a prophet, people who think that...
Okay, so let me see if I understand what you're saying, and you can confirm or deny what I'm saying. So he started off sincerely wrong, but he was sincere, and he was trying to incorporate his beliefs, his pagan beliefs from Arab society, with things that he might have learned from the Christians and Jews who lived in Arabia at the time. As he became more influential and more powerful, and started taking on these many wives and uh, getting more corrupt, then it became the purity became less important to him. It became more of a political type of arrangement rather than religious. Would you say that's correct?
Yes, I would say that's very correct. And not only that, well, it is also true at the beginning. Even at the beginning, he was assailed constantly by doubts. He was assailed, first he thought he met a demon. He constantly doubted whether or not he was saying things were true. That's why in 1094, Allah reassures him that if you have any doubts, go ask the Jews and Christians. They will surely back you up. But at that point, Muhammad probably really thought that the Jews and Christians would back him up and that they would confirm what he said. But later, when the rug was pulled out from underneath him, and he realized that, you know what, all my worst fears are true, he just leaned into it. He's like, he became a warlord. So, but there's another aspect here that's really interesting in Muhammad's early theology that you see more clearly in other places. So what happens after? So some people are touched by torment, and they're the ones who should fear, and they're the ones who should sorrow, right? And then there are people who aren't. What happens to them? So if you go to Surah 20, ayah 56, we find, so we showed Pharaoh all our signs, but he denied them and refused. And then he says, this is Pharaoh's words, hast thou come, Musa, he said, to expel us out of our land by your sorcery? We shall assuredly bring thee sorcery, the like of it. Therefore, appoint a tryst between us and thee, a place mutual agreeable, and we shall not fail it, neither thou. So there's going to be like this magic showdown. So, have you come to expel us out of our land? You see the same thing in Surah 7, 109, and then 110. Said the mullahs of the people of Pharaoh, surely this man is a cunning sorcerer who desires to expel you from your land. What do you command? So his theology was that whenever the messenger would come, his enemies would want to expel him. And that includes Musa. So he doesn't realize here that Musa, his entire purpose was to have the children of Israel sent out. He doesn't yet know this. He figures this out later, and it kind of gets grafted into other areas. But in the original telling of this encounter, Musa is coming to call the people of Pharaoh to Allah, and if they refuse, then Pharaoh and the council thinks that they want to expel the unbelievers, while the goal of the unbelievers is to expel the messenger and his people. And this idea of expulsion, it runs throughout the Quran. If you go to the people of Lot, they talk about expelling Lot. So there are all of these ideas of who's going to be expelled and who's going to inherit everything. Now, if you go to Surah 26, ayah 57, so it is 26, 57, we find what happens to the people of Pharaoh. So we expelled them. This is the people of Pharaoh. This is Allah speaking. The people of Pharaoh got expelled from gardens and fountains and treasures and a noble station, even so, and we bequeathed them upon the children of Israel. So the ones who inherited the land in the original telling of Pharaoh and Moses in the Quran, that Israel inherited Egypt, and then they crossed the sea to another place in the original telling. But this idea that there is this fight to expel certain people from the land, and then an activity of God, a calamity of God comes upon them. And in the original telling, the flood actually sweeps away all of Pharaoh people and all of Pharaoh's works as well. It's explicit that all his works are destroyed. So Allah is supposed to come to your rescue, destroy the people who are against you, and then you destroy them, expel them. The ones who aren't killed have to run away. And then you get to inherit that land that previously had held unbelievers in it. And then now you are the dominant one, and you will now prosper in the place of the unbelievers. And that's the rest of that theology, which is really peculiar, isn't it? Really peculiar. Doesn't match the biblical story, and it changes drastically with what Muhammad says later on about like he fixes the story of the Exodus in a number of places and adds in other details to hide what his original narrative was. But this is the standard narrative for all the prophets. What's supposed to happen?
Doesn't he kill Pharaoh in his story of the Exodus?
Yes, he kills him.
Okay, yeah.
But the very first story was that Pharaoh was killed and all his people were killed and all of his works were swept away by a flood. So it wasn't just the sea like rushing in and killing his army in this very first story. It is instead the story of a flood coming upon the waters and knocking down everything that Pharaoh had built even.
I wanted to ask you something. Yeah, it's some of the stuff that you find in there, and I've done a couple shows. You know, we've talked about some of the anachronisms that we find in the Quran, and some of the direct contradictions of, for example, if you're talking about the Exodus, you talk about the story of Moses. You have, I think it's Pharaoh's wife drawing Moses out of the water, as opposed to Pharaoh's daughter, and. You know,
it's better than that. It's better than that. You ready for it?
Okay.
She just takes that baby in the first version and yeets that baby straight into the ocean. It is an ocean. It's not even a river, and he just throws the baby into the ocean. And
really?
Yeah. Yes, she throws the baby into the ocean, and the baby gets washed up onto the beach. And then Pharaoh's wife finds the baby and picks up the baby.
Oh, Moses' mother's does.
Yeah,
throws it into the ocean, and
Moses'
then he gets washed.
mother is the one who throws the baby into the ocean. There is no Nile River in any of these stories. And then in another one, Muhammad fixes it, and he actually makes a little. He borrows the word ark actually from the Ethiopic Ge'ez language, and has him now put in an ark and then thrown into the ocean. It's still the sea. It's still not a river. And it's still not the baby placed carefully among the reeds and then watched. And in fact, Moses' sister is not sent until the day after, because Moses' mother gets nervous that she just chucked her baby in the ocean to ride on the waves and get washed up on the beach.
Does it provide any type of reason for that? Or it's just vague and ambiguous like everything else that we read?
No, it actually does say that it's because they were saying, destroy the sons and spare the daughters, and that Allah told her to do it, in fact, which kind of makes a very interesting point, because one definition of a prophet in Islam is someone who speaks to God, whether or not through intermediaries or whatever, right? So if you speak to God, then you're a prophet. Well, guess what? She speaks to God. God brings a message to her. And actually, there's no evidence that there was an intermediary there at all. There's no mention of an angel or anything. You know, God just tells her to do something, she does it. But that would make her a prophet in some sense. And some Islamic scholars have dealt with that. But Muhammad explicitly said that that prophethood is not among women, that no women can be prophets. And
or presidents.
Yeah, or leaders of any type.
Leaders of country, right.
And so they they play, and you shall never prosper. So I guess, Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, they just didn't prosper. But
outliers, that's all they are.
It is weirder than you think. Yeah. Just throw that baby into the sea. It's horrific. I'm just like, are you kidding me? Wash up on the coast, like on the coastline is what it says.
Well, we've discussed here on several different occasions the anachronisms that we find in the Quran, not just the errors and the contradictions that it has with the Bible, but also the anachronisms. I don't want to throw you a curveball here, but I mean, if you could think of some of the anachronisms that come out of, because we've talk about Joseph being sold into slavery for dirhams, a currency that didn't exist at the time, and coins didn't even exist at the time. A Samaritan building, helping Aaron at the Mount Sinai, David having chainmail. I mean, what are some that you think that are patently obvious, that are easily demonstrable? Because let me just
the crucifixion, of course, yeah. The folks, two of the sorcerers, or more, I forgot exactly how many, but Pharaoh crucifies some sorcerers on palm trees.
Yes.
So
okay,
that's a problem with this specific narrative.
At the time of Joseph, clear back to the time of Joseph, not even just Moses, but I mean, clear back to the time of Joseph. There was,
but
it's Moses, because they used the cupbearer. The cupbearer gets. Was it the cupbearer or the other one gets crucified?
Baker, I forget which. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, there's this crucifixion, which was in the Middle and New Kingdoms of Egypt there, or at least in the intermediate period, in the second intermediate period in the New Kingdom of Egypt, hundreds of years before. There's Haman there, who somehow teleports through time and space from like the 500s BC back to either the 1200s or the 1400s, whether or not you do early or late Exodus. And you have him teleporting. He has the wrong name. He's in the wrong place.
Well, that's the name
building
is the
a
giveaway.
Tower. Yeah, the name is a huge giveaway
Nimrod.
because he's a character, right? He's an actual personage in the Persian court, and now all of a sudden he's here hanging out in hundreds of years before he was born in Egypt. Why? My favorite one so far, though, is if you do a close reading of Exodus, you realize who Pharaoh's, quote, council is, his mullahs, right? Who are they? They're the elders of Israel. Muhammad didn't know that the elders of Israel were not, that the Egyptians and the Israelites were two different people groups. And it actually says in the Quran that it is Pharaoh who divided his people into sects and then had one group oppressing the other. So the division, the creation of Bani Israel, is actually credited to Pharaoh because they're the oppressed group, right? And it's that like oppressed group that is part of Moses. And so you have this very bizarre, very, very bizarre thing happening there.
So you're saying that the Quran teaches that the Israelites are actually descendants of Egyptians?
It doesn't say it, they are of the people of Pharaoh. Pharaoh and the Israelites are the same people in the Quran. And in fact, when Muhammad is initially telling the story, he doesn't know that they're called Israelites. He's just like the people of Pharaoh and the people of Moses. And then later he figures out that the people of Moses are called Israelites. And later still he finds out that Musa was supposed to be sent to say, send my people out, not I'm going to call you to Islam, and if you don't listen, I'm going to throw you out. So if you go to, there are a whole bunch of different burning bush accounts, although it's a tree or just a fire in the Quran, right? And you notice how many of them does it say that he's being sent to Pharaoh and his council in order to have the children of Israel let go or sent out?
I don't know. But I do. Go ahead. Just one. Okay.
Just one, and it's appended to the end. It's stuck on at the end. Every other time it says, because he has grown arrogant, you are to go to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh has to be among the people of not just Musa. You could say, oh, he's kind of sort of the people of Musa because of the adoption, right? No. You have to say that he is also among the people of Aaron because Harun is also sent to him, and Harun is explicitly called a prophet. So Harun is a prophet. Aaron is a prophet. He is sent to Pharaoh, and so Pharaoh and Harun are the same people. They're the same folk. They're the same ethno-linguistic group, Kaum, according to 14.4. If you look at 14.5, immediately after, who's the example of a prophet who was raised up from among his people and then sent with their language. Well, it's Musa being sent to Pharaoh. That's supposed to be the example that proves what's said in 14:4. So Muhammad doesn't know at first that they are different people and have a different language. That's why he thinks that what Musa would want is to call all of it. And again, remember, Moses is given 3 signs at Mount Sinai. He's given those 3 signs for the elders. These signs are not for Pharaoh initially. They're first to the elders. So then Moses goes to the elders, and the elders believe him. The elders come with him to Pharaoh's court. But instead, the elders are now at Pharaoh's court and siding with Pharaoh in the Islamic narrative. And the signs are only ever presented at Pharaoh's court to Pharaoh and the mullahs, the elders, together. So the elders have been transformed into the elders of Israel are now with Pharaoh, hanging out with Pharaoh, and are the same people as Pharaoh is. It's incredible.
I did a debate with a guy one time on. I'm trying to make sure I get the verse right, because his whole supposition was that God cannot enter his creation, cannot enter into his creation. And then when you tell him the verses from the Bible that God walked in the cool of the night with Adam and Eve, God wrestled with Jacob, and God was a burning bush at Mount Sinai. The whole thing is God is the Islamic theology on this is God is completely other, that he cannot, he's kind of like this watchmaker that made the watch, wound it up and tossed it in the ocean, said, okay, I'm going to leave you alone, let you go for it.
Well, not quite like that. He's still there is no cause and effect in Islam. So Allah recreates everything one instant to the next, and there is no continuity. But he's doing it from outside. So in that sense, you're right. He is doing it from outside, but there is nothing mechanistic that you're allowed to believe in Islam if you are a Sunni especially. You have to believe in their atomic theory. And they don't mean like atoms. They mean like momentary recreations of the entire material world from one moment to the next. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, and what I did was I have, let's see here, 3, 1, 2, 3. I have Quran 20, chapter 29 through 14, Quran, or no, this is a Tasfir. I'm sorry. Okay, this other one is a Quran verse though, 27, 9. But there was one of them that clearly says that he spoke from the bush, from within the bush. God says from the bush. And I brought that up, and he goes, no, well, it says over, and this is what they do. They'll sit there and because if there's different versions of a story, they'll pick the one that fits their supposition. They won't pick the one that, of course, that makes it clear. And I can't remember if it was 20.
It's in 28.
I got this all jumped. It's been
28, 27, 20, and 21 all have the narrative in it, so it's kind of confusing. It doesn't matter what they say. The issue is that the Quran also says that Allah spoke to Moses directly. And funnily enough, this is supposed to be something only to Moses, but he actually speaks to Aaron directly too, in that bit where they're trying to fix, when Muhammad desperately is trying to fix his mistake, that he forgets to tell Musa that he's supposed to tell Pharaoh to, send out the people. And that bit, they add in Harun too at the end, and then they're speaking together. So Allah actually speaks directly to Harun as well. But there is no intermediate to speak with them. When he says, I am Allah, that has to be Allah speaking from the fire. It cannot be anyone else, because the Quran elsewhere says that it was that Musa heard directly from Allah. That means that Allah's voice, his speech, entered creation. And if that is his attribute and not his creation, and they say it's his attribute, that his word is his attribute and not his creation, that he himself is entering creation in order to do that. But it does very clearly see that blessed is the one who is in the fire and those who are around it. In the fire is Allah, and he's the one who is speaking from the fire.
From the fire, right.
There's also other problems. So Allah sends down the stone tablets to Musa, right?
Okay.
And what happened to those tablets?
In the Quran or in the Bible?
In the Quran. Who wrote
I don't know what happened in the Quran. It's hard to say.
Guess
I don't. Maybe did a sheep eat them? A she-goat eat them in the morning or something?
No, but I mean, Allah actually wrote on those tablets too. So Allah is able to touch creation in order to write himself on those tablets. It also says, that Allah shaped Adam with my own two hands. So that's a dual form, so it's two hands, right? He's shaped with my own two hands. How dare you, Iblis, not bow down to that which I shaped with my own two hands? And if he has hands, and if that is an attribute of his, then that attribute, not a creation, is interacting directly, not through speech, with
creation,
with something that's material, right? And yeah, you can say that the angels gathered the clay from all over the world and brought it to Allah up in heaven, but then he shaped it with his hands in some sort of way. So that means that he and creation came into actual contact in some way. So there are a number of difficulties, and they try to jump around it, but you really can't. Even in Surah 6, it's kind of funny. It says in verse 3, I think it is. 6:3. He is Allah in in the heavens and in the earth, and on the earth is how we'd say it. It's the same preposition in Arabic, but that's just because of how Arabic works. But he is Allah in the heavens and on the earth. So,
wow, how do they run away from that, Mary?
They go, oh, it just means that he's worshipped in the heavens and on the earth. I'm like, no, it doesn't say
really?
that. He is. And so you see that, how they do it? He is God of the heavens and the earth. It does not say that. It says in. But you see all the to be worshipped alone in parentheses and stuff. He is Allah. No, he is Allah in the heavens and on the earth. Yep, there you go. Fi. Yep.
So they're adding to Allah's word.
They're fixing it.
Yeah, aren't they saying all that Allah can't come into his creation because they're trying to oppose Christ, coming to us and becoming man and everything like that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I get too. It's like, oh, well, wait a minute. Then the Christians would say this, so we have to oppose this. When did they start opposing even the Quran, so that it doesn't sound like, in their thinking, Christianity, that God can come into his creation?
Yeah, well, the Shia don't do that because they realize that backs them into the corner. And in fact, some of the Sufis are actually panentheists. So they actually believe that like bits of God are inside everybody and part of every creation and stuff. And that's why every so often the Sunnis like kill a bunch of Sufis for being heretics. One of the most famous Sufis, Al-Hajjal, I think, or Halaj. I forget where the J is and where the L is. Anyway, one of the most famous Sufi saints was executed for saying, I am al-Haq. I am the truth, because that is something that can only be said of God. And he was saying that he instantiates that attribute of Allah in a very real way. And so they won't say that Allah can't enter creation, but the Sunnis all do. They all say that Allah can't enter creation, and that's not because of the Quran.
What did they do to this guy? They said he was al-Haq?
They executed him. I think they may have set him on fire.
How do they reconcile 14:6, John 14:6 then, when Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life? I mean,
they just pretend that is isn't there.
Oh.
They just go,
Corruption.
well, that's
the
new Injil. That's not the Injil in Aramaic. If they come at you and say that the Injil should be in Aramaic, then you ask, what does Injil mean?
Right. Well, you were dealing with this last night. Yeah.
Yes, and I always do that. I always hammer on.
Can you go through that? Because I thought it was okay. Great the way that you talked this guy through this. So go ahead.
Yep. I had somebody who was one of those little giggly, hey, I'm going to get the Christians. And he just got devastated last night because he was clueless.
As I said, it's the women form of Sam Shabon. Better looking. But I'm not saying that's not a lot, but I'm saying, you know what I'm saying. Okay. I don't mean to be mean here, but okay.
So
we've had Sam on here a couple times, and Sam, we love Sam here.
But so I asked him, what is so what is the Injil? He's like, oh, well, it's the book that was given to Isa. I'm like, well, what does Injil mean? It's a word, right? And it's not an Arabic word originally. It came from somewhere. Where did it come from? What does it mean? And a few people actually know it means good news. And then you go, in what language? And if they don't even know that means that, they're like, well, I don't know. It's just the name of the book. It's like, well, it has a meaning. It comes from somewhere. And you lead them down to the fact that it's Evangelion. And that's how it was, more or less how it's really originally pronounced in Greek. Evangelion is a Greek name. It is a Greek name because the book is Greek. It's a Greek name for a Greek book. Very simple. Greek. Not Greek Aramaic, not Aramaic Greek. Greek name for a Greek book. And even whenever it was translated into other languages, a lot of the times those languages still called it by its original Greek name that they just put in their own script. So in Aramaic, it's called the Evangelion again, because it was translated from the Greek, which was the original language. And what we have with the Evangelion is, if you go to any church in Eastern Orthodoxy today, or 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or 1,500 years ago, or 1,800 years ago, well, maybe they would have had it in 200 AD yet, because some of the churches were broke, but at least by 300 AD, right? They would have all had in their possession a physical book, and that this is called the Evangelion. The Evangelion is not like an abstract name. It is the name for the physical codex, is what we call it if it's between two covers, right? It has pages, it's between two covers, it's a codex. So that codex is called the Evangelion, and it's in Greek, and it contains inside of the Evangelion, it has the fourfold gospel, the fourfold Evangelion. It has Matthew, it has Mark, it has Luke, it has John. That's the only thing that is ever inside the Evangelion are these accounts. And now they might say, oh, well, that's the Gospel of Matthew. Where's the Gospel of Jesus? I'm like, no. What is it called? Open any Bible in any language. Show me that it's called the Gospel of Matthew, because it's not. It's called the Gospel according to Matthew, the Gospel according to Mark, the Gospel according to Luke, the Gospel according to John. Why? Because there's only one gospel. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ. There's only one good news. It's the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, over and over and over again, if you open the Quran, it talks about warnings and glad tidings. But the glad tidings are never told. What are the glad tidings? The glad tidings are, behold your God. Go to Isaiah. Here. If you look up, good news, it is in a couple of places in Isaiah as a prophecy, but specifically Isaiah 49, so chapter 40, verse 9, right? There's a messenger of good news who was John, and the good news itself is, behold your God. And that is Jesus Christ come in the flesh. The good news is the incarnation. It is God coming into his temple, and his permanent temple is the incarnate flesh of Jesus Christ. Very simple. And yet there's glad tidings all over the place in the Quran, and no knowledge of what those glad tidings should be.
Uh-oh, am I lagging?
I think you are a little bit.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, you're good now.
Okay. Okay, so you were mentioning yesterday about the etymology of the word itself.
Yes. So the etymology, yeah. So I said that it was borrowed. Did you hear my answer before, or did you miss?
No, I did. I had to get. I shut the door. Every time I leave this computer for 2 seconds, I hear the wrong. I missed the most important things. I'm sorry.
I did cover it all. I covered that it's a Greek name for a Greek book. It's a physical codex between two covers. Right. Evangelion. It means good news. You is the good, and Evangelion is the news part of it. So it's good news.
No, but the Arabic etymology of the word.
So it has no trilateral root at all. It's a borrowed word, so it does not work in Arabic. Right. So there is no Arabic trilateral root. If you got to, you know, if this is an Arabic word, it would have a trilateral root that would make sense, but it doesn't, because guess what? It's not an Arabic word. So it's a borrowed word, and borrowed words, of course, don't have the same rules applied to them.
Okay, so when they start talking about the Injil, where do you, because there's a lot of speculation out there where, you know, it could have come from, or what the origins it might have been. What is your thoughts on that?
The etymology is that it was borrowed from Evangelion. It was almost certainly borrowed indirectly through the Ge'ez, which has fewer syllables. But if you go to any Islamic source, you know, their dictionaries that have the etymology, they will freely admit that it was borrowed ultimately from the Greek. So it's not an Arabic word; it's a Greek word. It means Evangelion. You know, it comes from Evangelion, almost certainly through the Ge'ez, but then arrived into Arabic in that way.
So when we had who was that one imam? We were talking to the imam.
Is it Imam Tawhidi?
Tawhidi.
That's it.
And you asked for the evidence for the existence of this Injil given to Jesus. He never really got around to it.
He never will. He never will.
Gee, I wonder why.
Well,
so where's their proof?
He's very, very smooth. He's very smooth. And so he will talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. But the thing is, it's a Greek book because it's got a Greek name. Hello? A Greek book. It's in Greek.
Well, that's one thing I noticed is that and this is one of those the typical ploys that they have, is that they'll sit there and listen to you talk, and they'll be very polite about it. You know, for a while, and then they'll start talking, and then when you interrupt them, so when they say, "Well, we don't have any evidence for the, you know, the evidence that we have for this, da 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 da," and then they'll pretend like they're offended, like you because you that you interrupted them, and it's real. It's the stench of the victim card dealing with these guys it's just so palpable. I just can't stand it. And when we sit there in these rooms with who was it last night? Like Boo or whatever the heck his name was. And you sit there and you listen to these guys, and they talk and they talk and they talk and they don't say anything.
They don't say anything. That's why I want to stop and have an interactive discussion. So if we're going to have an interactive discussion, you can interrupt me. That's fine. But I want to have I don't demand that I get to monologue for however long. I want to make sure you are following along, and then we can have an interactive discussion. I don't want you to just sit and wait for your chance to say something stupid. Thank you very much. So they like,
Mm-hmm.
So they like to also come with the 14:4 that says no one is sent except as a messenger with their own language to their own people. Well, the problem is that condemns Muhammad, at least as much as it does, you know, saying that Jesus's book will be in Aramaic or whatever. Well, Muhammad should only be coming to his own people. So not only should it be in Arabic, but his religion is only for Arabs. So everyone who isn't Arab needs to leave Islam right now. Now, I've already shown you that Muhammad thought that Moses and Aaron, who were sent to Pharaoh and the elders, because Muhammad thought that Pharaoh was from the people of Israel. Well, of course, they're going to pretend that Muhammad didn't make this mistake, even though it's very clear that he did. But now you have a contradiction where we only send a messenger to his people, but instead he's being sent to someone else as an example of a person sent to his own people, which is really hilarious. So, and then we also talk about, and then after he kind of figured out his own problems, you have stuff like where Muhammad actually admits that they're separate people, or states that they're separate people, trying to dig him out of his earlier mistake. If you go to 7:127, you get said the chiefs of Pharaoh's people. So these are the mullahs now. Suddenly they've been reassigned to Pharaoh's people. wilt thou leave Moses and his people to spread mischief in the land, etc., etc. So now there are two different people, because this is Muhammad's attempted a fix, even though he's kind of stuck with some of the earlier ones. You also have the statement that Isa was sent to as a mercy to all mankind, right? It clearly says that Isa was sent to everyone. It's in multiple places, al-Nasi, all mankind, and it says that about the same thing that it says about Muhammad, it says about Jesus as well. So if you're going to say that Muhammad is actually the prophet to everyone, that Isa isn't, well, then you have to explain how basically the same terminology was used for the two different figures. It makes no sense. And in addition, the entire idea, well, it's a nonsensical religion with a nonsensical premise. I usually pull out some of the very clear verses. Surah al-Madiyah, that's 5, starting in 43-ish, I think, where it talks about how do you ask us to judge between them whenever they have the law, or whenever they already have the law? Do they ask you to judge, Muhammad? Basically saying that the children of Israel already have the law, and that this law is the Torah, and it was sent as a guidance for them, and that they shouldn't ask you for guidance when they already have it. And in the same chapter, it says that the people of the Injil and the Torah stand upon nothing until they stand upon the Torah and the Injil. So is this something that they don't have right now? Is Allah just too stupid to know that this is missing and corrupt and gone? And then a lot of times I like to read the corrected version of the Quran, where every time it says this is about conforming what is with you, literally between your hands, I correct it. I'm like, well, this is what Allah said, but what he meant to say is it does not confirm this, and it was corrupted and lost, and so you shouldn't listen to it. You should listen to what I'm sending now instead.
Well, if you have to press that point that the book that's between their hands, we know what was between the hands of the Christians at that time. We have copies of the Bible that predate this, clear back to.
So
what is it? Vaticanus? What's the earliest complete Bible? It was Vaticanus. Am I right on that?
I don't remember whether or not it's Vaticanus or Sinaiticus or Alexandricus, or which one it is. But
I get the dating on those three mixed up.
But before that, you don't have to even rely on the manuscripts, because you go back to the people who. You have the partial manuscripts, you have the quotes, you have real people who lived and died at specific times, who have in the writings that they made at those times quotes from previous things. And those things that they're quoting have to exist for them to have quoted it. Now, I happen to believe very strongly that First Clement was written before AD 70. I think it's kind of ludicrous to assume that it was written later, because there is no later, it was written right after a persecution, and it seems to have been written like right after Peter and Paul were executed. And it also assumes that the sacrifices in Jerusalem are ongoing. Please tell me how anyone would write assuming that sacrifices in Jerusalem are ongoing in the 80-90s. No one would.
Right.
So right.
Wow.
So this really all the scholars who want to go, well, let's do the dubious or safe date. I'm like, it just doesn't make any sense internally for it to be any later than this. So, and he quotes Matthew, Mark, Luke. Well, the reason they want to make it later is because he clearly quotes Revelation. And certain people want to make Revelation really late, because they want to make Revelation happen after.
Okay, hold on. So slow down. Hold on. You said that. No, that's okay. Clement of Rome, First Clement, is quoting is quoting from the Gospels, but not who the Gospel writers are. But he's quoting from Matthew and Mark. You said.
So he quotes words of Jesus that are found only in Matthew, Mark, and not in Luke. Okay, so it could be either Matthew or Mark. He quotes Luke, but not the words of Jesus. So this has to be from Luke. And then he doesn't say who it's from. He's just quoting as he goes along. He doesn't say where almost anything is.
So he's quoting from the Gospels themselves, but not specifying who they are. But she said that he also quoted Revelation.
He also quoted Revelation, which is why people try to push it late, because they wanted a late date for Revelation for various theological reasons, for various historical reasons. People want a late date for Revelation.
Okay,
The
then let me
interesting
ask you
thing
one
is
more
that
question.
he,
Let me ask one more question, and then
Yep.
I'll let you go with that. Okay, and then you said that he also alludes to the fact that the animal sacrifices are still occurring at the Jewish temple
yes,
that was destroyed in 70 AD.
yes,
That same temple.
yes. But because he
Incredible.
quotes
Did not know that.
Revelation, because he quotes Revelation, if you want to argue very strongly that either Revelation is not an inspired vision, or that it could only possibly be a premillennial type of document, that's the only possible interpretation. If you have either one of those positions, you kind of want it to be after AD 70, so that it can't be a prediction of, so the 666 can't be Nero, or even Nero, but also this is going to be a repeated pattern in the future, which is fine too. But that would nail it very heavily into, it has to be truly future if you believe that it's inspired. And then, of course, if you don't think it's inspired, then it's just talking about Nero, right? So people want it to be later. But we do know in church tradition that none of the Christians were in Jerusalem at the time that the temple was destroyed. They all fled to Petra because of the prophecies about what was going to happen to Jerusalem. Now, that could just be Jesus's own words, but it could also mean that they already had a revelation. They don't specify. It's just like, well, the prophecies told everybody to leave, so they did. So it could be one or it could be the other. Now, I'm more of a pre-mill myself, so I'm not saying this because I'm anti-pre-mill, but I'm saying that I really think that Clement of Rome is before AD 70. That means that Revelation is before AD 70, and that actually John may not have reached him until after Revelation did, because he doesn't quote John, which is very interesting.
Well, Clement didn't know John, though. I'm willing to be wrong on that, but my understanding is he didn't know John. He knew Peter and Paul,
right?
And then he became Bishop of Rome. But what's interesting, because the people in Rome had to know what happened to Jerusalem. I mean, it isn't like, well, they could be writing these things and just assume that there's not a siege going on in Jerusalem for 3 years. Because what is absolutely fascinating is that you say that Clement of Rome said that when he wrote these things, and he's quoting from Matthew and Mark, and that there were still sacrifices going on in Jerusalem. That puts that. That's a new slide for my slideshow. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you can chase it down. But I noticed that when I was reading it too. I was like, why are they saying that this is the 90s? This doesn't make any sense, because that's a big deal. Because, then you have the abolition that was promised in Hebrews of the sacrificial system. And you have the fulfillment of the prophecies and the Gospels that it was going to be destroyed. And Clement has no knowledge that these are not still going on in the document, which really makes no sense for a late date. So that's that. So whenever they try to push that there must be some other things, well, the thing is, these things don't exist in isolation. These documents were passed on, they were quoted, they were used, they were written about, they were talked about, the Christians were talked about. So these are not like these floating, isolated kind of documents that don't have any history to them. They have a time, they have a place, they have people who read them, they have people who use them. All of these things build on one another. There is no history. We have the chain of bishops and of discipleship and everything else that establishes very clearly what the true church is and what they always taught, what they always believed, the scriptures that they received and that they used. And so these things, and what the apostles must have taught, because they taught people. They were real people, they taught people. What did they teach? Well, you find it in their writings. And what do you find? You find that Jesus Christ was crucified and he rose again on the third day, and he is worshipped as God. And not as a second God next to the Father, but rather there is one God.
We did a show on Sunday talking about what the earliest Christians believed. I'm not talking about, after the Gospels were written down, or when Paul wrote his epistles. I'm talking about with the creeds that are contained within Scripture itself, like 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 8, and how these early creeds clearly demonstrate that there was no evolvement like a lot of, not modern scholars, but scholarship for maybe 100 years ago was saying that the Christology of Christ was something that evolved over time. You go from Mark all the way up to John, and what I was doing was I was showing verse after verse after verse that are early creeds stating that Jesus Christ is being worshipped as God incarnate within a year, within 2 years. And these dates are confirmed by the critical scholars. For people like Bart Ehrman even says that all of these creeds come from Jerusalem, meaning that they come from within 2 years after the cross.
Yeah, and you also have the situation where, when does Acts end? Acts ends around about AD 62, possibly as late as 63-ish. That's prison, when it ends, right? Yep. Paul's in prison, and he's already been there for 2 years. So it may be as late as 63, right? That is the sequel to Luke. And Luke was the last of the 3 synoptic gospels to be written. Absolutely everybody agrees on that. So that pushes back, everything else to the 50s. Right. They can't be later than the 50s. So Matthew and Mark are 50s. It's just the ludicrousness of some of the speculation that's out there is just it's absurdity, because they're not thinking about these people being real people in real places, in real times, real events. When can they have happened? You would never end your story with Paul, and Paul preached to them for 2 years. The end. If he were martyred, that would be the end. That would be the great.
And he's in jail. We'll just end it right there.
We'll just end it.
Waiting to be executed, right?
I mean, he wasn't even executed. He didn't even have a trial, right? Nothing had happened. He was just waiting. He was just sitting and waiting.
Think of all the people think of the 2 people that they do mention that were executed, that died in the book of Acts. They mentioned Stephen.
James and Stephen,
right, and James. Okay, who is Stephen? Well, he's the guy that dies. He's the first guy. Well, what if you're going to mention Stephen and you're not going to mention Paul or Peter?
Yes.
Seriously?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of a giveaway, right. Or it should be.
Yeah. So
okay. I wanted to shift gears here, because you mentioned something else in those notes that you and I had gone back and forth. You said something about Allah praying was stolen from a Jewish Talmud, and that I read that. I'm like, this is going to be good. So I'm gonna just let you run with that ball.
All right. So we know that Allah prays in a number of verses in the Quran. It's often translated as blesses, right? But he does salat, which is prayer. And of course, he prays for the believers, and especially for Muhammad, the prophet. And the question is, what the heck is Allah praying? So let me bring up my notes here.
I didn't mean to stump you on that.
No,
we got everything cataloged there on your computer. We got all this verse. I wish I was that organized. Cataloged.
So I have it in Obsidian. That's what I'm starting to use. All right.
What's it called?
Obsidian. It's a hypertext markup language, or markup thing that you can go and you can see all the connections between everything that you've made. It's really cool. So if you go to Surah Al-Baqarah, that's 2, number 157, it says that they are those on whom are the prayers from their Lord and mercy, and it is they who are the guided ones. And 33:43, you find out it is He, that's Allah, who prays for you, Muhammad, and His angels too, to bring you forth out of the darkness into the light, for He is merciful to the believers. And 33:56.
What was that last verse? What was the last verse?
Sorry about that. It is 33. I'm just running, aren't I?
Okay. 33:43. 33:43. Okay, and this one is 33:6. Okay, go ahead.
33:56. Verily, God and his angels pray for the prophet. Ye who believe, pray for him and salute him with salutation. Right? So they falsely try to hide this by saying that Allah is blessing the prophet. Blessing is a different word. It's barakah. Right? But this is salat, prayers. But Allah's prayers are so important that Muslims are supposed to say, prayers of Allah be upon him and peace. Every time they say, salah, Allahu, alayhi wasalam. There we go. So that whenever they say Muhammad's name, they go, sallallahu alayhi wasalam again. And that is.
But they just do it a lot faster.
Yeah, they do it much faster, because I'm kind of terrible. But so most typically in English, sometimes you'll just see peace be upon him, but that's not it. Or else it'll be mistranslated as peace and blessings be upon him, but that's not it. It is prayers of Allah be upon him and peace. So why is it so important that people solicit Allah's prayers? This actually comes from a number of ahadith where for Muhammad, where Messenger of Allah basically says that you absolutely have to send salat upon Muhammad. Say that Allah, may Allah pray for Muhammad. If you don't say that, then you'll go to the hellfire, right? So there are all these benefits for you if you actually say that for Muhammad. Well, if you go and you're just like, why is he praying? What is he praying? What on earth does this come from? Well, you can find out here. Let me throw this up and you can click on it. This is the English translation of it, and this has sources in. Oh, great! Now I have to figure out what I did with the window. Here it is. My active window. There you are. Hello. Welcome back.
Are you posting
if you
that?
click across to this, I just posted it, and and I'll just look at it.
It looks like it's a foreign language or something.
It should be translated. It should translate immediately. Is it translating?
Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, as I was pulling it over, it was still in Swahili or Arabic. I'm sorry.
Arabic. So these are specific things about Allah's prayers. So these are sources about what he is praying. On the authority of Atab ibn Abi Rahab, it reached me that the messenger, may Allah, this is again, send prayers upon him and pray for him and grant him peace. When he was taken to Assumption, every time he passed by a heaven, this was whenever he was on the night flight, right? Angels greeted him. And when he came to the sixth heaven, Jibril came to him. This is an angel, and he greeted him. So then we find out that he said when he gets to the seventh heaven, Jibril says to him that Allah, and this is Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the Most High, prays. The prophet, may Allah pray for him and grant him peace, says, does he pray? And then Jibril says, yes. He said, what is his prayers? He said, glory be to the Holy, Lord of the angels and the Spirit. My mercy precedes my wrath. Okay? So my mercy goes before, overcomes my wrath. Here's another one that says pretty much the same thing. It says that, this is time, it's people asking Moses, what does Allah pray? And he says that I pray and my prayer extinguishes my anger. And there is another source here, if you can scroll down a bit. Scroll, so we can see. So these are the, actually, if you go to Ibn Kathir, it also says that the prayer is, may my mercy overcome my anger, but we don't need to click on it. So Ibn Kathir says that, but we don't need to go over to Ibn Kathir. But it also says the same thing, may my mercy overcome my anger. The same thing is found in Shia books. Look at that. So my mercy overcomes my anger. My mercy overcomes my wrath. So this is what Allah is praying. You can also find this in a hadith where it says that Allah has written for himself mercy. But first, let's check out its original source. It comes from the Talmud. So I will send this over to you. You can pop it up there. This is Berkoth or 7a. If you'll click on that.
Okay.
No, that's the poor one, but that'll work. So how do we know that the Holy One, blessed he, says prayers? Because it says, even them I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in, and that actually should say the house of my prayer. This is
Where are we at on this, Mary? I'm sorry.
Sorry, at the very beginning.
Okay.
So he says, how do we know that the Holy One, that is God, says prayers? Because it says, even them I will bring into my holy mountain and make them joyful in the house of my prayer is actually what it says in the better translation of the Talmud. This is a poor translation. It is not said their prayer, but my prayers. And so in the Hebrew, if you look at it, it says a house of prayer, and then the my is appended to prayer rather than being appended to house. Now, there are various ways that you can look at this. You can say that, look, this is really just a compound word. So it is my house of prayer together, right? So it's fine that it's on the end of prayer because it's being treated as a compound word. Or you could say it's a house of my prayer. God is saying it's a house of my prayer because people are praying to God, and that makes it his prayers. But the rabbis tended to go for the weird explanation. If something was slightly odd, they leaned into it. So they're saying, no, Allah is actually, in fact, praying. And so so another rabbi said, may it be my will that my mercy may suppress my anger and my mercy prevail over my other attributes, so I may deal with my children in the attribute of mercy and on their behalf stop short of the limit of strict justice. So that is what God is praying according to rabbis of the second century. Right. So that your mercy is overcome by anger. Excuse me, the anger rather is overcome by mercy. Right. So
we'll jump back to this one. It's saying the same exact thing.
Yes, it is.
Let's see, where was that? Was that right here? He said yes, he was. God in glory. Doggone it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. Each one of those has some version of that. Okay. So
it's a ripoff.
Yes. And if you find out who Rabbi Yohanan is, and Rabbi Yosei, and Rabbi Zutra, you find out what time period they're from. They're all post-Jesus, but they're actually probably from the period of, they may be, reporting some earlier traditions, but this is rabbinical speculation. They're not being visited by angels. These are not words of God. This is not inspired Holy Scripture. This is instead rabbinical speculation. And this rabbinical speculation has now entered the Quran and the Islamic sources. So, yeah.
How many? Okay, so I've looked at this about some of these insertions, some of these. Some people call them borrowings. I call it plagiarism. When you look at 532, and compare that to like the Midrash Sanhedrin 4.5.
Oh yeah.
It's for we have proclaimed for the Jews that if anybody everybody knows this. When you ever kill a soul, it's like they killed the whole world, and everybody who saves a soul is as if he saved all mankind. And you compare that, do a side by side juxtaposition of the two. I mean, if you can't see that it was ripped off, then you're blind or being deceptive. And this one, right? I'm going to keep this one too.
Yeah.
And another question is, okay, it says that Allah's praying.
Yeah.
To who?
To who? Exactly. Well, who is he praying to according to these rabbinical speculations also? See, the rabbis here are recognizing the necessity of an intercessor so that the attribute of anger does not destroy us. Right? They're recognizing this. But it makes no sense in their theology. To whom is he praying? Why is he praying? What's going on? This is very odd. So if praying God makes no sense in the theology of the Rabbinical Jews. For the Talmud, it's likely that this was kind of one of these leftovers from the times when the Jewish scholars almost universally recognize a multi-personal yet singular God. The idea of the Memra is not something that is, the Logos, as we call it, the Word of God, is not something that was made up by Christians. This was very well-established Jewish theology. The multi-personality of God was completely non-controversial until after the time of Jesus, and then it got declared to be heresy.
I think
Akiva,
Jay
who's one
has
of the
done a
most,
show on this before. Have you heard Jay talk about this extensively?
Yep.
I've heard him talk about this.
And I've read a fair amount about it. So
what's it called? What's it called again? The multi-personalities of what?
Of God being multi-personal, the Memra, the Memra theology. Yeah. So there are many texts that are in the Jewish scriptures in which there are two Yahwehs, two figures of one God. They're both the one God, yet distinct from each other. So this so-called second Yahweh was most commonly called the Memra, or the Word of the Lord, in early Jewish thought. So Christians well know today the identity of this Word of the Lord. He is the eternal Son. But after the Son came down as Jesus Christ, the Rabbinical Jews who rejected Jesus then changed their theology and erased most of their analyses that pointed to plurality. But a number still remain. This God-praying interpretation is likely to be a remnant of this older theology, as we know that Rabbi Akiva himself, who was the teacher of Yosei, the first one who said that Hashem was praying, used to believe in a multi-personal singular Yahweh before he turned against it. Now, in Christianity, we have the perfect answer for both a praying God and also for dealing with the requirements of strict justice and God's desires to be merciful to his children. And that is the coming of the eternal Son and Word into the world by taking on flesh as Jesus the Messiah, his death in our place, and finally his role as the eternal high priest and mediator between men and the Father in accordance with the Father's goodwill. As we find in the book of Hebrews, long ago, at many times, in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom he also created the world. And so the Son is eternal. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to the angels in name as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. So his role as our mediator. So right now he is at the right hand of the Majesty on high, at the right hand of power, and also on God's throne as well.
That was now that you mentioned that was actually one of the early church creeds that we talked about on Sunday. That's part of an early church creed.
And this is getting really interesting because watch what's about to happen. His role as our mediator is also spelled out in 1 John 2. My little children, I am writing these things to you so that you may not sin. But if anyone does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. He is the propitiation for our sins, and not only ours, but also for the sins of the whole world. So God, or the constant intercession of Jesus Christ, it can be seen as the mercy of God prevailing in some sense over his wrath, not because one is stronger than the other. They are perfectly fulfilled in Christ and in our picture of the Trinity. We also learn that in sitting at the right hand of Majesty, the Son is actually on the metaphorical throne itself, along with the Father and Spirit. If you go to concerning the vision in Revelation 22, the Son is called the Lamb there, and the Holy Spirit is called the River of Life. So if you jump to Revelation, let's see, what verse is this? It is Revelation 1-3. You'll see, then the angel showed me the water of life. I'll just drop that in the chat for you. How about that? Okay, then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb, through the middle of the street of the city, and also on either side of the river, the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding fruit each month, etc., etc. No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship them. So the throne is the throne of God and the Lamb on it, and the Spirit issuing forth eternally from it. Right? So you have this picture here of Trinity and God and Jesus, who is at the right hand of the Father and also is on the throne, both in metaphorical sense, of course, who is interceding for us and is providing, as he prayed on earth. He is our high priest in heaven, who has offered once the sacrifice for sin, and is now, sitting until the earth be made his footstool, right? So we have had this solved. Then along comes Muhammad. He takes the words of the Jewish rabbis, who aren't prophets, as if they were God. He repeats them, and without understanding the theological nightmare that he's bringing upon himself, that Islam simply can't solve, he just brings this in Islam. But there are ahadith about this prayer, and we find that Muhammad is accidentally describing something like the Trinity in the ahadith. So let's take a look at one of these where he does this. I find it so interesting that even in his rebellion over and over again, he ends up affirming the very things that he is fighting against. So if you can pull that up for me.
Uh-oh.
Did you see it?
I was just, DL just got here, so I just popped him in. You'll see that I'm not a good multitasker.
No, it's fun. I just now dropped it.
Okay,
I was just talking to cover up the silence as I was pulling it across.
So this is Fortress of the Muslim, this one right here?
That should be it. Keep scrolling down. Wait, that should not be it. That is a wrong one. I'll find the correct one in just a second. Here, just let me find the correct one. I don't know why I have the wrong link there.
This one's Dave anyway.
Okay, got it.
I don't want to talk about it.
No, I don't want anything Dave. I've got a good one. So that one's not Dave. Here you go. There you go. That's the correct one.
All right. Pop that over there. Boy. Okay.
Not pulling up.
No, it's coming. It's coming. That's just.
Yeah. So.
There we go.
The Al-Kitab, the heavenly book, is co-eternal with Allah because it is a word of Allah. Without his word, in some sense, it's co-eternal. Whether or not it was on tablets before or not, it's eternal. Without his word, Allah would be a mute, and so his word must be eternal with him. The Quran also confirms that Jesus is the Kalimatullah, the word of Allah, which should make him eternal too. This phrase was listed from Christian sources again, with Muhammad not understanding the implications of what it meant at the time that he placed it in the Quran. So now we have this hadith. It says, narrated Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, when Allah created the creation, he wrote in his book, and he wrote that about himself, and that is placed with him on the throne. Verily, my mercy overcomes my anger. So upon the throne of Allah is Allah together with his eternal word, which bore the plan of Allah's mercy before the world was created through it. As the Quran claims that Allah created by speaking and thus by his word. And is through that word that by no other means that the mercy is shown to the believers. So this is why
where are you reading that from, Mary?
I wrote it.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Thank you, dear.
Yeah. So this is why Muslim scholars are always cower behind lies and obfuscation. In truth, even as Muhammad attempted to reject the triune God that he blasphemed, he accidentally confirmed the necessity of the true God again and again, exposing himself and his false hoax of the Islamic Allah. Nice.
So this Herrera guy is the same guy that developed 5,000 of them in 2 years. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. It's
am
also
him. Am I right on that?
Yep. But
okay,
the source. But
yeah,
there are a whole bunch of ahadith that are similar. Go ahead, Connie.
Yeah, sorry. I got a question. So if Allah's making his book, is that a part of creation?
Whether or not the book itself is created is very controversial, because supposedly the first thing he created is his pen. And a lot of them say that he tells the pen to write. But in a lot of these narratives, he never creates a book. So that book itself these tablets, in some sense, must be eternal if these are correct ahadith. Other people say, oh no, he created a book in there somewhere. And the question is, well, then where? If the pen's the first thing, wouldn't the book be the first thing created? Why is it the pen? So
there's
Islam,
a trinity
it doesn't
there
make sense.
with Islam, the book, the pen, and Allah.
Yeah,
Right.
but except it is the word that is, it is the word of Allah that is uncreated and eternal, and the Quran as the word is, that is how the Quran is uncreated and eternal. Although the writing happened at some point, that word was somehow still uncreated. Don't ask me how.
I know, and try to engage in the conversation about things like that. It's just absolutely, it's frustrating. I can see it when you do it in Clubhouse, how frustrated people can get. Your famous word last night, I'm done. I mean, you just, it's just, I mean, I'm serious. They can get you so frustrated when you sit there and you show them using not only the biblical sources to show them it's wrong in the biblical sources, but you also, a great example was that the guy the other night didn't even know what a parable was. What's that?
No, what you could say is similitude.
It.
Yeah, well, what you go to similitude and you find the verses in the Quran about it, and you're like, so you don't know what that is? Because the funny thing is that Muhammad was very frustrated about similitudes. He was very frustrated about things of that nature, and he did not like any kind of parable any kind of metaphorical language that didn't say it was metaphorical. He hated. And that's one of the reasons the Salafis are stuck in Allah literally having two hands, because if he didn't literally have two hands, Muhammad would tell you, because he was a very literal person. And if he was making a similitude, he told you he was making a similitude. Otherwise, you shouldn't take it as
two right hands that he has?
Indeed.
No? Okay.
Yep. Two hands on the right side. So somehow that would make them right.
Sounds like a birth defect of some sort.
Yes.
A deity defect of some sort. All right. Well, we are at 6:57, folks. This has just been a lot of fun. This makes it easy for me because I love people coming in here and just taking it and running with it. And I don't know how many different topics.
And you get to sit back and relax.
I know. You spend a hard day at work, and then you come home and you got to, you're going to do this show, and you're always fired up to do it. Don't get me wrong, but some days it's just nice to sit back and let other people run with that ball. And I appreciate Mary coming, and we're gonna have to do.
What's Amina?
Miss Lena is going to be a character that I bought this stupid thing for, and it's ridiculously expensive, by the way.
Have you ever gone out?
No.
Have you ever gone out?
No.
Why not? I would have gone out with you just to see what some of the Muslims might do a double take. But anyway.
I don't think that most people would react, even the Muslims. I don't think they'd react because, you're supposed to ignore. If a woman is dressed like this, you're supposed to pretend that she's not even human, basically, and ignore her as much as possible. Because they're forbidden.
Not human.
Well, you're not supposed to look at a woman. Is not supposed to look at a man, and a man isn't supposed to look at a woman. So you should imagine that she's like a post if she isn't related to you. But I want to leave you with one hilarious thing that I discovered very, very recently. So same chapter 6. This is why I'm translating this, because it forces me to slow down and I discover so much more.
And this is another thing people need to know. She's translating the Quran from the Arabic.
I'll buy that book. I will buy that book.
Yeah, and I'm giving all the notations for it in here. Let's see.
What verse did you say it was?
It's toward the end. Hang on, I've got to find it. Oh, where are you? We're getting close. It's a pretty common word. So, nope. It's got to be before there.
Is that chapter 6, Eric?
Yeah.
I'm at chapter 6.
Where it talks about the trumpet. Oh, goodness. I'm having a hard time finding it in here because I've already put in the other word for it. I bet I have trumpet in my notes, though. Yes, I do. All right. So, verse 73. it says, and it is he, Allah, who created the heavens and the earth, and the day he says be and it is, or will be, his saying is true, and his kingdom is the day the Surah is blown, and he is the knower of the unseen and the seen. That word is actually shahada, by the way, based on shahada, right? The things that are evident witnessed. He is the all-wise and the all-aware. So, the day the Surah is blown, that word is not trumpet. That word is literally thingy. So, Surah, the trilateral root means a created or a manufactured thing, or a devised thing, a made thing. So apparently Muhammad didn't know what was going to be blown, and he just used a word that basically means the thingy is blown.
The thingy.
S-U-R. Yes, S-U-R. Here, I'll stick it in chat.
Oh, and I'll just go ahead and put it up here, word by word. I'm going to put it up in word by word.
Yep. So scroll down. So, is he who created the heavens? Keep going to trumpet. Yep, there, up. So it says al-suri. The E is because it's genitive.
Right here?
But sur,
this is it?
Yeah, sur is the actual word. So click on that. Now scroll up. Every time it's just sur, it's trumpet. But it actually means to form, to fashion, to shape. It's a made thingy. It doesn't mean trumpet. Scroll all the way up to the top and look at all the other related words. So, yeah. So form 1, to incline them, or to make them, or shape them in some way. So keep going to form, to fashion, to shape. Scroll down a little bit. Sorry. So this noun is a formed or fashioned or shaped thingy. It's a thingamabob. It's a whatchamacallit. It's a thingamaduper. It does not mean trumpet. It's a made object. How do you like that? When the thingamabob is blown, because Muhammad didn't know what this word meant.
It sounds like
Is that like everything? Is that like everything?
Yeah. It's just this made thing, this thingamabob. So that is my final gift to you. The
that
fact
was
that
great
Muhammad
yesterday,
does
man.
not have a trumpet, and it's just a thingamabob.
Jeez.
Okay, I got to write that verse. What verse was that again? You said it was 6, 7?
It's in a whole bunch of them, but anytime
73.
it says trumpet or horn,
73.
yeah, it's 73. Anytime it says trumpet or horn, it doesn't actually say that. It says thingamabob. There are a bunch of
so how do you
messed
spell
up borrowed
that?
words.
Thingamabob. Okay.
A thingy, a made thing, a doohickey.
A thing.
It's a doohickey.
Yeah, doohickey.
No, I'm not going to write that because people might read this later on. What was she talking? I'm not going to do that.
Talking about? What's a doohickey? But a doohickey is almost exactly the same thing, because a doohickey is usually like a made thing, like, oh, hand me that doohickey. It's never, you never mean like a branch whenever you're talking a doohickey or a natural thing. You only mean something that's a tool of some sort, right? A made thing, a fashioned thing. So doohickey is actually a perfect translation. It's a doohickey.
Well, you think the
and a word that you don't know how to say, you say, just give me the doohickey, that you can't come up with the word. So you say doohickey or thingamabob or the thingy there.
And that's what Muhammad did, because apparently Allah forgot what a horn was.
Wow. And he's supposed to be all-knowing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And Allah knows best.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, Mary, thank you. You've been so much fun tonight, and I really do appreciate you coming on and providing all this great information for our show. Diving into that stuff on Clement. I'm going to pull out. I got it right up here. I'm going to pull it off the shelf tonight, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to fact check you on that.
Yeah, read
not to fact check you,
yeah.
but I want to find that because I want to put that, because I have a PowerPoint that I do that discusses not the chain of narration, but the chain of custody that we have,
right,
in written form for our for the gospel message. So that was kind of a gem piece for me tonight. Okay, so everybody, we will be back here on Sunday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to be discussing, heresies, and how they are the foundational principles and theological tenets for Islam. And that I'm going to have to go over and shut this one down over here. Okay, everybody, thank you. God bless you. Thank you so much, Mary, and everybody else for coming. Everybody in chat, again, thank you for coming, and we'll see you Sunday. God bless.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks for coming, Mary.